Picture this. It's 1944. The world is still burning from war, and in a quiet hotel in New Hampshire, representatives from 44 nations gather around polished wooden tables. They're not discussing battle strategies, they're redesigning money itself. They make one decision that will change everything. The US dollar becomes the world's reserve currency, the currency everyone trusts, the currency everyone needs. For 80 years, that decision gave America an invisible superpower, the ability to print money that the entire world accepts, to borrow without limits, to spend without immediate consequences. But here's what they didn't tell you in that hotel room. Every empire that's ever held this power has eventually destroyed itself with it.
Rome did it. Britain did it. And right now, in 2025, America is sprinting down the exact same path. The numbers don't lie. $36 trillion in debt. That's trillion with a T. And it's accelerating faster than ever before. This isn't a political story. This is a mathematical inevitability. And if you hold dollars, if you have savings, if you plan to retire someday, what happens next will reshape your entire financial future. Let me show you how this works in your everyday life. Imagine you're at a coffee shop in 2019. Your usual order costs $4. Simple, predictable. You barely think about it. Fast forward to today, that same coffee, $6.50, maybe $7 in some cities. Your salary probably went up a little, maybe 5%, maybe 10% if you're lucky. But that coffee went up over 60%. Your rent probably doubled. Your groceries cost nearly twice what they used to. This isn't just inflation. This is the hidden cost of debt, and you're paying for it every single day. Here's how the trick works. When a government can't pay its bills, it has three options: raise taxes and face angry voters, cut spending and face angry voters, or option 3, print more money and let inflation quietly steal from everyone's savings.
Guess which option politicians always choose? The Federal Reserve creates new dollars out of thin air. They call it quantitative easing or liquidity injection. Fancy words for the same old game. Print money, devalue everyone's savings, pretend it's necessary for economic stability. And for a while, it works. The economy looks healthy, stock markets hit new records, politicians give speeches about how well they're managing things. But behind the scenes, the debt grows, the interest payments balloon, and the trap gets tighter. This isn't new. We've seen this movie before, and it always ends the same way. Let's go back 2,000 years. Rome, the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Military dominance, engineering marvels, a currency everyone trusted. The Roman denarius was silver, pure silver. When you held one, you held real value. But running an empire is expensive. Wars cost money. Bread and circuses for the masses cost money. Paying the legions costs money. So the emperors got creative. They started shaving silver from the coins. Just a little bit, not enough for anyone to notice immediately. They mixed in copper, added more cheap metals. In 64 AD, a denarius was 95% silver. By 265 AD, it was barely 5% silver. The coin looked the same, but its value had been hollowed out. Roman citizens watched their savings evaporate. Prices exploded. A soldier's yearly salary in 300 AD could barely buy what a month's salary bought a century earlier. The empire tried to fix it with price controls. They made laws limiting what merchants could charge. Anyone caught raising prices faced execution. It didn't work. Merchants just stopped selling. Goods disappeared from markets. The economy collapsed into barter, and the empire crumbled from within, long before barbarians knocked down the gates. Sound familiar?
Fast forward to 1913. Britain rules the waves. The pound sterling is the world's reserve currency. The sun never sets on the British Empire. London is the financial center of the world.
If you want to do international business, you do it in pounds. British banks finance everything from railroads in Argentina to rubber plantations in Malaysia. Then came the wars, World War I, World War II. Empires are expensive to maintain. Wars are even more expensive. Britain borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, much of it from a rising power across the Atlantic, America. By 1945, Britain was victorious but bankrupt. They owed more money than their entire economy produced in a year. The pound was supposed to be worth $4, but everyone knew that was a fiction. Britain couldn't pay its debts, couldn't maintain its currency, couldn't hold on to its power. In 1967, they finally admitted reality. They devalued the pound by 14% overnight. The Prime Minister went on television and told the British people that the pound in their pocket was still worth a pound. Technically true, but it bought 14% less than it did yesterday. The reserve currency status slipped away, not in a dramatic crash, but in a slow, painful decline. The torch passed to America. Now it's America's turn, and the script is playing out exactly as before. In 1971, President Nixon made a choice. He closed the gold window. Until that moment, other countries could exchange their dollars for gold at a fixed rate, $35 per ounce. But America had printed too many dollars, made too many promises, fought too many wars, and the gold was running out. So Nixon ended it. The dollar would no longer be backed by gold. It would be backed by trust, by military power, by the fact that oil could only be bought with dollars. For 50 years, that system worked. America spent freely, fought wars in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, bailed out banks in 2008, printed trillions during the pandemic, and the world kept accepting dollars. Because what choice did they have? But now, the cracks are showing. Here's where it gets scary. Let's talk about the numbers that politicians don't want you to see. America's national debt is $36 trillion. But that's not the scary part. Debt isn't automatically bad. If you borrow to invest in things that generate returns, debt makes sense. The problem is what America borrowed for. Wars that cost trillions and created more instability. Bailouts for banks that gambled and lost. Stimulus checks that created temporary relief but permanent debt. Now look at the interest. In 2020, America paid about $300 billion in interest on its debt. Manageable. In 2024, that number hit $1 trillion. $1 trillion every single year just to pay interest. That's more than the military budget, more than Medicare. It's the fastest growing part of the entire federal budget. And interest rates have been historically low. Imagine what happens when they rise. Every percentage point increase adds hundreds of billions to the annual interest bill. Here's the trap. To pay the interest, America has to borrow more money. To borrow more money, they have to issue more bonds. To make those bonds attractive, they have to pay higher interest rates. Higher interest rates mean bigger interest payments, which means more borrowing. It's a spiral, and every spiral has only one ending. So what happens when the music stops? Let me paint you a picture. It's not science fiction, it's extrapolating current trends. The U.S. Treasury holds an auction. They're selling bonds to finance the debt. Usually this is routine, boring. Buyers always show up. But one day, they don't. Maybe it's because China decides to stop buying. Maybe it's because inflation makes the returns look pathetic. Maybe it's because investors finally realize the debt can never be repaid. The auction fails, or barely succeeds with much higher interest rates demanded. Panic spreads. If the U.S. government can't borrow, it can't pay its bills, it can't pay Social Security, can't pay government employees, can't pay bondholders. They have two options: default on the debt
or print enough money to pay everyone. Default would be catastrophic. America's credit rating collapses. Borrowing becomes impossible. The economy seizes up overnight. So they print. The Federal Reserve creates trillions in new dollars. They pay everyone what they're owed. Problem solved, right? Wrong. Those new dollars flood into the economy. Prices explode. Your morning coffee costs $20, then $50, then $100. Your savings, your retirement, your paycheck all become worthless in real terms. The number in your bank account stays the same, but what it can buy evaporates. This isn't theory. This is what happened in Weimar Germany, in Zimbabwe, in Venezuela, Argentina, Turkey. It always follows the same pattern. Excessive debt, inability to pay, print and press goes burr, currency collapses, society fractures.
But there's another scenario, one that's already happening in slow motion. Countries around the world are quietly preparing for a post-dollar world. China and Russia now settle trade in their own currencies. Saudi Arabia, America's oldest Middle East ally, is accepting yuan for oil. The BRICS nations are discussing a new reserve currency backed by commodities. Even America's closest allies are diversifying, holding fewer dollars, buying more gold, preparing for the day when the dollar's dominance ends. This won't happen overnight. Reserve currency transitions take decades, but once they start, they're impossible to stop. And when the world stops needing dollars, America loses its superpower. It can't print money that everyone accepts, can't borrow cheaply, can't spend beyond its means. The adjustment will be brutal. Living standards will fall, the military will shrink, the political fights will be vicious.
Here's why this matters to you, right now, today. If you're holding cash savings, you're holding a melting ice cube. Every month it buys less. Every year you get poorer in real terms. If you're depending on a pension or Social Security, you're depending on promises made in dollars, dollars that are being systematically devalued. If you own a home with a mortgage, you might benefit in the short term. Inflation makes your debt easier to pay, but it also destroys the value of any cash reserves. The wealthy already know this. They're not holding cash. They're holding assets, real estate, stocks, commodities, Bitcoin, gold, things that can't be printed. The wealth gap you see growing, this is why. When currencies collapse, asset owners survive. Cash holders get wiped out.
So, what's the lesson from all of this? First, understand that this isn't a conspiracy. It's not a political game. It's math. Pure, simple, unavoidable math. Second, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Rome debased its currency and collapsed. Britain overborrowed and lost its empire. Now it's America's turn in the spotlight. Third, the people in charge aren't malicious, they're trapped. Every option is bad. Raising taxes is political suicide. Cutting spending means cutting programs people depend on. Printing money seems like the least painful choice until suddenly it isn't. Fourth, you can't stop this, but you can prepare for it. Holding some assets that maintain value through inflation. Understanding that cash is not safety, it's a position. Learning about how to preserve wealth when currencies fail. And finally, remember that empires end. Reserve currencies change. What seems permanent and stable can unravel faster than anyone expects. The debt spiral isn't a future problem, it's happening right now. The question isn't if there will be consequences. The question is whether you'll be prepared when they arrive. History is littered with empires that thought they were different, that thought they'd found a way around the basic laws of economics, that believed their power made them immune to consequences. They were all wrong. America's debt spiral is accelerating, the interest payments are compounding, the global trust is eroding, and the mathematical endpoint gets closer every day. This isn't about doom and gloom. This is about clear-eyed reality. understanding the game that's being played, recognizing the patterns that have played out 100 times before. The Roman citizen who saw the silver content dropping and converted wealth into land survived. The one who trusted the government's promises lost everything. The British family who moved assets abroad before the pound collapsed maintained their wealth. The one who kept everything in sterling watched it evaporate. The pattern is clear. The warning signs are flashing. The debt spiral that ended Rome's dominance and Britain's empire is now spinning faster in America. You can't change the outcome, but you can choose whether you'll be ready for it. The clock is ticking.